Hi, everyone. Welcome to the August Ask Me Anything session, August 2023 Ask Me Anything session here with RentPrep. I'm Andrew Schultz, community manager here at RentPrep. I'm also a licensed real estate broker here in the state of New York with over 14 years of experience in the property management and rental property industries. I have with me today a couple of guests, actually. We're going to go ahead and add Josh to the stream. You guys probably recognize Josh because he's been on a few of these with me at this point. Josh, how are you today?
I am good, Andrew. How are you?
Not doing too bad. Josh is our marketing manager over at RentPrep, and we also have a second guest we're going to add in today. This is Carlos. Carlos is the business development manager over at RentPrep. If you get to a point where you're working on anything on the enterprise side of the house, which is typically when I call RentPrep, Carlos is usually one of the people that I speak to. So Carlos does a lot more on the business enterprise side of things versus the smaller landlords, I guess. Is that the best way to describe it, Carlos?
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. The enterprise side is typically going to be 50 plus doors. So I kind of submerge myself into that part of the business, but I also have knowledge on the RentPrep side itself.
There you go. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a good Monday. I had the Starbucks in me, and I'm ready to go.
Well, we've got a ton of great questions today.
Yeah.
We have a ton of questions today, actually. I was going through the list earlier, and it looks pretty good. I think that we have a lot of good questions to
It's
pull from today.
Definitely the most we've gotten in a few months here. So
nice.
Should be
good.
Not a
bad thing. That's not a bad thing, though. It keeps us busy. You never want to be struggling for actually, I shouldn't even say that. We've never had one of these events where we've been looking for questions at the end of it. We always have more questions than we have time at the end of this when all is said and done.
We also normally have a lot to say about all the questions. So
yeah, we're I mean, I'm especially very long-winded. Somebody's got to rein me in.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. It's nice that we've got the three amigos here. We haven't had
it's really exciting.
I think since maybe Katie was the last, our senior screener, Katie Brosh, was the last time we had three people on. But sometimes, I like you, Andrew, but just the two of us here, sometimes we gotta throw a wrench into the mix. And I know Carlos is going to be able to contribute to that.
I know there's some screening questions in here as well, which I'm sure Carlos will be able to offer a lot of insight on. But I called Carlos last week because we're going to put a video out on it. And that video is going to be really good. I'm really happy with how that one came out. But I called Carlos last week because I had a pay stub that I was relatively certain was fake based on what I was seeing. I looked at it, another staff member here in the office looked at it, and between the two of us, we said, all right, I think this is fake. And then we went to Carlos to see, what do you guys think? Because you see a lot more of these pay stubs than we do. And I know it's not necessarily within the scope of what RentPrep does is determining whether a pay stub is fake or real. But I like to pass stuff like that along because it helps keep all of our skill sets sharp.
Sure. Yeah, it's becoming more and more prevalent, and again, this is why it's important to look for other tools out there that you can take advantage of to get better insight versus again taking something like that and guessing whether or not it is valid or not. So, but there are other tools available.
Yeah, and as the technology as the technology to fake pay stubs gets better and better and better, or any documentation, doesn't even have to be pay stubs. We've talked about credit reports in the past too. As the technology to fake things gets better, your defense has to be as good as their offense.
Sure.
And a lot of landlords, I think, are going to get caught in a situation where they don't realize that this is out there and it's happening. So hopefully they wisen up a little bit and realize what they're actually dealing with. And I think that there are going to be some landlords that get caught with some of these fake pay stubs because some of these things are so legit looking. Like that one that I sent you, Carlos. I spent several minutes looking at that before I found enough red flags to lead me to think, all right, I think this is fake. I want to send it to Carlos to look at.
Well, and you're an experienced property manager.
Yeah, we screen hundreds of tenants a year.
For the newcomers and the newer landlords, new properties, someone just jumping in the game, there's definitely going to be a little bit of a learning curve.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I know that video will be out in a couple of weeks. I just went to the editor, but I encourage everybody to watch that because we actually go through four different pay stubs and show some of the red flags that we find as we're going through. Some of them are obvious, some of them not so much, but it's definitely going to be worthwhile to take a look at that when it comes out in a couple of weeks. So, Josh, you want to start us off with a question? I believe you have the big list in front of you.
Yes. I'm gonna start right away with this question from Sharon. Sharon asks, my tenant has very poor hygiene. Between not bathing or washing his clothes, the house has a horrible smell, and the upstairs tenant complains to me about the odor. How do I handle this delicate situation?
So our lease actually addresses housekeeping. It's written right into our lease that good housekeeping is expected of everyone, and that there shouldn't be, noxious odors and things like that coming out of your apartment. It's basically a situation where you start with a lease violation notice, and you kind of have to ratchet things up depending on whether or not the tenant is doing what they need to do to rectify the situation. Like, we've had situations where we had a hoarder in one of our buildings that we took over from another property management company. And it started as, okay, we're going to send a lease violation that you need to start cleaning up this property, or, give us a plan, start, blah, 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 blah. And it eventually escalated to the point where we did wind up having to evict that tenant because they were just downright refusing to deal with any of the issues as a result of hoarding. And I mean, there were hygiene issues on top of all of the other issues. But when you start talking about hoarding and things like that, you can be adding a ton of weight to the property, tons of weight to the property, which can have structural issue concerns. And how put a giant stack of newspapers in the center of a room where there's the least amount of support, it's going to be an issue. There's no way around it.
How does hoarding work? Because isn't it technically classified as like a mental, could it be classified as a mental disability or an illness?
It can. I think that it is technically considered a mental illness, hoarding now. I'd have to look into it more to know for sure. I mean, it's not like we just went from here's your lease violation notice to, okay, we're sending you to eviction court. Like, there was a process by which we were trying to work with this tenant, trying to work with the tenant's family because they understood the situation, trying to get help from outside agencies, whether it be Department of Social Services. They're not really geared towards mental health, but there are a couple agencies here in Western New York that are more geared toward that. And we were just striking out everywhere we were going. The tenant had no interest in getting to a point where they were compliant in anything. And ultimately we did have to evict that tenant. We had to ask them to leave.
Yeah. I wonder how that'll look in the future with.
Yeah. Andrew, I'm concerned with the question with Sharon. Like, she specifically said poor hygiene. Is hygiene one thing and keeping the property in order another? I almost feel like this individual is keeping the property in order, but just like themselves are not bathing, and themselves are not taking care of what they need to be personally. You know what I mean? In a situation like that, I mean, is there really anything you can do about that? That person just stinks.
That's a good question, to be honest with you. I mean, in our lease, we do have good hygiene is expected of everyone. So if it's getting to a point where the individual's odor is overpowering the total air in the unit or in the building, like this is obviously a multifamily. So if you have someone that is walking through a common area to get to their apartment and they can smell someone else inside their apartment, we experience it every single day. The most common thing that you smell when you walk into the common area of an apartment building is pot. Like, it's not uncommon to walk into any building and smell that somebody just fired one up. And like, that's kind of the same thing. Like, if it's somebody that we know is smoking in their apartment, we would send them a lease violation notice just the same way, due to the noxious odor and this and that and the other thing. So I guess I would probably approach this from the same standpoint. I would send a standard lease violation letter. Our lease actually has that in it as far as good housekeeping. So we actually would take their lease and tell them, reference the section in the lease that they're in violation of, and that we give them a period of time to clear it up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. Does that apply for food too?
What do you mean?
When I cook up a really nice pasta and I have that bad boy simmering for a good 4 or 5 hours,
sure,
I got some nice Italian meats in there. That aroma.
Nice Italian meat.
Oh, it could get pretty strong.
I bet. I get it.
Have you ever had
actually, you know what, Josh, can you find the question? There was a question, I think, about foods.
I was just about to bring up, I don't know if I included it on there, but I want to say it was about,
if you could find it,
was about spices and curry Curry spices was the question, and I was just gonna say, can you even in a split unit or a multi-unit, can you even have rules in your lease about what people can cook?
No, definitely not. You can't tell somebody you can't cook here.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Where is this question? Was it
I
through
grabbed it. I pulled it
Facebook?
up on screen. It was
Okay, all
from
right.
Austin. I'll read it out. Does the curry cooking smell fade over time? Anyone have experience with this? We have a house rented to a family that cooks with a lot of curry, and the kitchen unfortunately doesn't have a vent fan. Does the curry smell fade quickly over time after someone moves out? I have a lot of experience with this exact situation because we used to have a lot of rental property near one of the college campuses, and we rented to a lot of international students from India who tend to cook with a lot of spices and heavy curries and things like that. And no, the curry smell does not fade over time. Essentially, what happens is the scent molecule is binding to whatever oil they're cooking in. And as they're cooking, obviously the oil aerosolizes a little bit and it gets pretty much everywhere. So the only way to get rid of a smell like that is to physically clean and remove the oil droplets, which are probably 90% of the smell that you're experiencing. And then either you may have to paint if it's at a situation where you can't get the smell out of walls or something like that. The other thing that we've had a lot of good experiences with is running an ozone generator to take smells out of an apartment. But the ozone generator is only going to go so far. If you haven't dealt with the root cause, which is the oil based, the oil with the curry aroma imbued in it, I guess, whatever you want to say. Unless you deal with the root cause, you're never going to get rid of the smell. So you have to deal with the root issue first before anything else is going to actually work. So, and this was a constant struggle with us. We had a lot of apartments that I feel like probably would permanently have an odor, like an odor of curry in them just from the amount of cooking that was done in them over the years and things of that nature. And eventually, yeah, it's going to start to, impregnate itself in any sort of finish, whether it be paint on walls, whether it be the cabinets, whether it be soft goods, textiles, things of that nature. It does eventually start to settle and it gets harder and harder to get rid of. So
yeah,
you definitely can't tell someone, no, you can't cook. We actually had somebody request a property owner request no cooking of fish in their building. And we told them flat out, that's not even remotely going to happen. And it's kind of silly that you would come to us.
Oh my God.
So
yeah.
Carlos,
All right.
did I answer your question there? Because you'd asked a question and I kind of went on a ramble.
No, you answered it. I think we're good to go on that.
All right, cool. Yeah, there's a lot to that.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump to, let's do a Facebook question.
Okay.
Let's do question from Marcia. When I do a preliminary application, I collect information from the person and just verify where they work, etc. Does RentPrep application do it in depth of proof? Does RentPrep application do it in depth of proof of employment and income earned, or do I ask for that proof myself? Thanks.
Sounds like a Carlos question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we used to offer a product a few years back, which was the resident employment verification calls. The reason why we pulled that from our product lineup for our RentPrep clients was because of I guess you could say the end result wasn't what we anticipated. And as time went on and things like the work number started to require subscriptions, it just didn't, it wasn't making sense. So, to answer your question, Marcia, would be, I would certainly utilize the income verification report. It is available through RentPrep. It's $10. What that's going to do is that's going to give you an immediate idea of what the deposits are coming into the accounts. But more importantly, it's going to give you an idea of what they currently have available. That makes a really big difference. If somebody has $100 to their name, they could be employed. They could have a perfect credit score, no derogatory remarks, but the problem is if that person loses their job or whatever the case may be, they got $100 to their name, that's going to change things. So, for proof of employment, there's a lot of different ways you could try and make a phone call. I don't know how much information you're going to get beside, yes, they might work here, maybe. But at the end of the day, the income verification report's able to scrub the accounts, identify recurring payments, and you can typically tie that into their employment. So that would probably be the best bet.
The nice thing is that report also gives you their average balance in their bank accounts as well. So if somebody, say, just came into a big pile of cash a month ago,
yep,
that's not going to be reflective in their average because they're only have 1 month with that high balance. If they were running a negative balance for 11 months, an average negative balance for 11 months, and then suddenly they have 1 month where they have, say, $50,000 in their bank account, you're going to see the $50,000 on the report as current holdings, but the average is going to show that, hey, this is not somebody that appears to be real financially stable. So
sure,
that's a nice product, and I encourage people to start using that, and we need to start using it more at Own Buffalo, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a really great product. I've had people ask me, we can understand the past, but do you guys have a tool that kind of can predict the future? And I said, yes, we do. And it's not a crystal ball; it's the income verification report. So it gives you an idea of what possibly where the cushion is with an applicant if they do come upon hard times. And keep in mind though, with this report, you're not going to see what they spend their money on. This is strictly deposits, and that's another big factor that we get as far as phone calls go. Is I'm not seeing anything that they spend their money on. You're not going to see that. It's only deposits. So it's up to the last 12 months. You're going to see things, like it could be child support. Grandma and grandpa's $100 birthday check. Whatever deposits were made into that account. The other nice thing is about the product is that the applicant will have the choice to link up more than one bank account. So if they have a savings and a checking and they want to show you both accounts, they'll have that ability to do so. They're able to see the report prior to submitting it so that if there are any discrepancies or something's not appearing, they'll have the ability to at least comment on that. And then from there, that opens up conversations, but they will not have the ability to manipulate the report. And this is what makes this thing so effective, is that, again, it's being generated through the bank. The applicant's seeing it, they can comment, but at the end of the day, the final report's being sent back to the end user, landlord, and so on. And then, that way, again, that it's been handled properly.
Well, and it's interesting because I know another property manager. They're not in New York. They're in Georgia. And I won't say anything more than that because it would be pretty easy to figure out who I'm talking about. But they will only look at applications where someone has gone through and done the income verification. They won't look at paper pay stubs, period. End of discussion anymore. I don't think that Georgia has some of the same laws that we have here in New York with regards to like lawful source of income protection, Section 8 vouchers, DSS assistance, things like that, which I think probably would factor into his decision to only take the automated income verification reports versus just pay stubs. But I think that it's going to become trickier and trickier to really verify, unless you're using a product like what the income verification report is. I think it's going to become harder and harder to really truly know what someone is doing with their financial picture. I think the biggest issue is like if you have tenants that are unbanked, like lower end units where they don't have bank accounts and things of that nature, that's going to be a real struggle because there's nothing to verify if there's no bank account for them to tie to. So in that situation, you basically now you're stuck relying on paperwork that may or may not be falsified. So that's a tough one.
Right.
I agree. The income verification calls, we used to use RentPrep for income verification calls as well as landlord verification calls. And just like you said, Carlos, it was very, very tough to get any sort of a response. Most employers won't even verify that someone is or is not a current employee anymore. So you're burning a bunch of daylight waiting for that to come back and then never getting a response. And then on the landlord side of things, we found that a lot of landlords just either they won't respond or they will flat out lie to get rid of a bad tenant. And that's not doing you any good. They're giving you subjective rather than objective information. And I think that anytime you can take subjectivity out of a process and make it just about the data, that's the best possible scenario for you. So
agreed. Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Let's move on here. I've got another Facebook question from Kim. Kim asks, my lease says any repairs under $300 are tenant's responsibility, but it would seem air conditioning repair, even if under $300, would be mine. How do you handle air conditioning repair bills. Also, if they can't get AC and an AC tech out on Sunday, does renter's insurance pay for a hotel? And she is in Florida. It's very hot, she says.
So sorry, I'm trying to find, I've got the question list up here and I'm trying to scroll to find her question so that I could also be looking at it to make sure we hit all the various points on it. I think that having tenants responsible for repairs under X dollar value is silly. I'm just going to
Is
come
that
out
common? Is that common in a lease? I feel like I've never.
Some landlords like it.
I've never seen
Some
any of
landlords
mine.
like it because it takes some of the burden off of them. I.e., they think that the tenant is going to just go ahead and take care of little repairs as things pop up. What is more realistic is the tenant is going to say, I'm not paying for that. This isn't my house, and ignore it. And then when turnover time comes, you have stuff that is either more broken than it would have been if you had just gone and fixed it earlier, like before the situation got worse, or you have situations where a tenant doesn't report a leak under a kitchen sink and now the cabinet is rotted out versus, okay, we had a puddle of water type of a situation. And I've seen, these are like actual examples from our own business. So I don't agree with having language in the lease that says that the tenants are responsible for the first however many dollars of any repair, because I think it discourages tenants from actually reporting repairs that are necessary. And I think that it leads ultimately to a negative outcome. So in a situation like this, especially where you're talking about a furnace, a hot water tank, an appliance for the most part, an air conditioning unit, something like that, all of those are building systems that should be maintained by the landlord, no questions asked. Short of a tenant flushing a bunch of concrete down the toilet or something like that and causing obvious damage to the plumbing systems, the landlord needs to be covering the cost of repairs for major building systems that break. Air conditioner is a good example. Going back to the toilet example, somebody flushes a bunch of concrete. Obviously, they should be paying for that. Somebody flushes a bunch of toilet paper and it gets caught on tree roots that are in the line between the house and the street. That's a landlord thing. That's another one. Like a lot of times people use this, no repairs under 300. Landlords aren't responsible for repairs under $300 because it catches a lot of stuff with like minor plumbing snakeouts and stuff like that. Here's the thing though, like you don't know what the tenant's doing. They might just sit and run a bunch of Drano down through there and screw up your lines. You're better off having a good quality plumber in your Rolodex that you know that you can call for situations like that, that is going to go out and actually tell you what the problem is. Because if there's a bunch of grease in the line, like then it's probably going to go back to the tenant. If it's a bunch of roots in the line, that's probably a property owner expense, and it pays to know what the root cause was when you get to the invoice, basically.
Right. All right. Good. Let's do another form submission one here. This one is a question from Jane. Jane asks, I am also a member of Furnish Finder, and my question is, a lot of landlords have started doing background checks, eviction notices, and credit checks on tenants. Is there any way to do just the credit and eviction history, because nurses have background checks already done by their employers?
I don't really care about somebody else's background check. I would probably do, not even probably, I run the full screening process every single time I'm placing a tenant. So it sounds like she's dealing with like a midterm, like a medium term lease, like a 3 to 6 month type lease situation, like a visiting nurse or something like that.
Right.
I would screen them just the same as you would screen every other tenant. There's no reason not to go and do a credit and background check just because of somebody's occupation. And I've heard that argument made before. Oh, they're an attorney. I'm not going to run a credit and a background check on an attorney. No, run the background check. Run your complete process every single time.
Yeah.
Hey,
Carlos,
Andrew,
is there a way to do just credit and eviction history?
Not on the RentPrep side. That's where the enterprise account would come into play with customization of product, configuration. But on the RentPrep side, no. I had a question too. Let me ask you this, Andrew. If you're not running, let's just say you have a rental and you're not running a full background check because the person is a nurse, but then you run a full background check on the next tenant that comes in and you deny them based on whatever you found.
Right.
Could that also dabble into that area of, well, why, discrimination, where you're running one on one and not on the other? So
Absolutely,
just
it
kind of
could.
keep your bases all lined up here.
Fair
Run everything.
housing's a sticky wicket. It's one of those things that once you're involved in a fair housing situation, there's no escape.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very costly. Like the
Yep.
fines alone, like a fair housing violation fine starts at $10,000 and goes up from there. If I remember, it might be 2,500, but I think it's 10,000 and goes up from there. And that's before you pay your attorney and you do all the missing time in the office, missing time to deal with the court case or whatever the case may be. Fair housing's a nasty, nasty beast. And if they come in and they start investigating you, they're going to look for irregularities in your screening process, or in all of your processes, really. So if you're in a situation where you're screening tenants, my recommendation, the RentPrep recommendation, I should say, is always have a set of fair housing compliant written screening criteria and follow that set of written screening criteria every single time that you screen a tenant. And if you follow it the same every single time, and if it is truly fair housing compliant, you're eliminating 99% of your fair housing issues right then and there.
Right.
So I don't think that it makes sense to not do the full boat on the tenant screening. Doesn't matter to me if it's a 3-month lease, a 6-month lease, a 1-year lease, a 5-year lease. I think that you still do the same screening process every single time. I'm not involved in the short-term rental space at all. I should mention that. I don't really know much about how the short-term end works I don't know if like Airbnb does a background check on anybody before they're allowed to use the service or not. That would actually be something that would be interesting to find out in both directions, really, because you have people that are posting sometimes just a spare room in the house that they're living in, and you're coming to stay in their house. I mean, there's some risk there. I don't know if Airbnb does any sort of due diligence on their end or not.
I know a while back we almost had a deal go through with some woman that was running a traveling nurses organization. So very similar to what this question was talking about.
Right.
They were looking to screen short-term rental properties for these nurses that were just coming into town for 2-3 months and heading out. So that's why that question caught my eye. But I just thought it was interesting. I
do the same thing every time. It's just a good way to keep yourself out of hot water.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's do this question from Paula. Paula asks, does landlord have to pay for fixing a low pressure sink faucet? Water comes out in a flow, it just is weak. Otherwise, the house has normal water pressure and everything concerning water flow is fine. Or is this the tenant's responsibility if they want another faucet?
I would say this kind of goes back to that question we were talking about before with the minimum $300 tenant responsible up to $300 for the repair. This is a building systems issue. It's something that the landlord should be dealing with. And more than likely, if you have normal water pressure on your cold side and you have low water pressure on your hot side, chances are you have some sort of buildup in the line. I bet you if I was to envision this house, it's an older house. It has galvanized plumbing in it, and that galvanized plumbing is shut down like a clogged artery. It could be something as simple as just pulling the supply line off and clearing. Sometimes you'll get a little piece of debris that gets stuck in the supply line or in the aerator or something like that. If the cold side's working, it's not your aerator. It's definitely on the line itself. So there might just be some debris that you can clear out of like the supply line or something along those lines. But more than likely, this is something where you may need to go back to cut the pipe at some point, further back to remove a bad section of galvanized or something like that, whatever it is that's causing the low water pressure. And I'm betting that it's probably galvanized somewhere in there. We've also seen shutoff valves that are not all the way open or all the way closed will sometimes cause a low pressure issue, either under the sink or further down. basically my recommendation would be start at the faucet and trace the line all the way back to the hot water tank and see if you can figure out where the issue may be. And if you're dealing with galvanized, you may be in a situation where you need to rip that galvanized out and replace it. But I would definitely say this is on the landlord. This is a building systems issue, not a tenant broke the faucet issue kind of a thing.
Right. Oh, good. All right. Let's move on to a Facebook question from Brooke. Brooke says, so I made a mistake looking for suggestions. Our lease states that the tenants are to pay the landlord me for solar bill each month. It has been many months and I just realized that they are not including it in their rent. Now they are moving out and they owe me $3,780. Should I let it go, take it out of the deposit, or discuss it with them to see what they think is fair? So it looks like
Well,
the tenants are able to,
I was going to say, Andrew, number one, they should not be pulling that or even considering pulling that out of the security deposit, correct?
Depends on the state. So in some states, you are allowed to deduct for unpaid utilities from the deposit. That said, like, I wish I had more information so I could better answer this, because I'm curious if the tenant was just short paying every single month. So like we have property management software, and in a situation like this, we would go in and so you've got your monthly rental charge, and then you would have every month we would go in and enter a charge on the tenant's ledger for however month they're supposed to pay for their electric on a monthly basis for the solar. So we would catch it like within a 30-day cycle, no longer than 30 days before we would know, and probably within a week, because we do our delinquencies right at the beginning of the month.
Well, that was my question there.
Well, and
she's saying that it has been many months, and I just realized that they're not including it in the rent.
So I wonder if it was a flat rate. They arranged for a flat rate at the onset of the lease or something like that, and she was getting short paid. I guess the question is, how did you not notice that they weren't paying it for several months? I don't really know how to answer. I mean, $3,800 is a lot of money for most people. $3,800 is not chump change. They're going to complain about that. Who is in the wrong here is still kind of vague, because I don't really know if it was something that was supposed to be billed as part of the lease, or maybe the tenants thought that the amount that they were paying was inclusive of the solar. If it was like a flat rate or something like that, there's just not enough information there to really be able to answer the question well. That said, at this point, if you're talking about several months of past due utility bills that were left unpaid, and it was up to the landlord to make sure that that bill went out on a monthly basis, I think the landlord's probably going to wind up taking a loss. Maybe talk to an attorney in your state and see what they recommend, because they're going to be able to sit down and go through your lease with you as well and really determine if you do have a leg to stand on. But I have a feeling that that one is going to turn into a very, very heated debate at the very, very least between the landlord and the tenant, if the landlord decides that they want to try to charge that bill.
Yeah. All right, let's do this question from Ron. It's a form submission question. What is your experience, good or bad, working with collection agencies for past due rent? Current and past tenants with the means but not the will to pay. I've seen contracts where agent has exclusive rights but is motivated to settle for cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oops. Throw that one back there. We've used a couple different collections agencies in the past. Actually, I came from the collections world. I worked in collections before I got into real estate. And frankly, I hated it. It's a blood-sucking, soul-sucking job. If you're ever looking for employment, try to avoid collections at all costs. I wonder if Steve would say the same thing, because I know Steve came from the collections world too. And Carlos as well. Yeah. That's right.
I loved it. It was the best job I ever had.
Why did you love that job? I have to ask, why did you love that job?
It was all about the negotiations, I guess you could say. It's like every call was either somebody who's going to win or lose. It just, I don't know, kind of gave you another notch if you got somebody to pay. But
can I ask what you guys used to collect on?
Yeah, so we actually started out collecting on just medical debt, and then it turned into past due like delinquencies. So
Mhm.
I have experience in that. And again, our recovery rates were extremely low, but
Yeah.
if the uh, landlord had gotten a judgment,
Mhm.
obviously, you're collecting on a judgment at that point. A lot
Right.
of times it would take a good 6 to 8 months before we would start seeing some money coming in if we put somebody on a pay structure of some sort.
Right.
And if we still didn't, then the judgment would stick around until they decide to make a decent sized purchase, and then you would just get a phone call maybe 2 or 3 years later. Hey, I got to get this cleared up.
Yep.
Then they want to negotiate a lower price, and at that point, that's where the mistake, in my opinion, comes in with just wanting to get the money. At that point, the person with the judgment holds the cards, and there shouldn't be
Mhm.
any negotiation because that person obviously has to get that
They
taken
have to
off.
clear
So
it. You want to buy a
don't
house, you're not doing it with a
it,
judgment on your records.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, what I would do is I would definitely get the judgment against the individual. I would wait probably a good 6 to 8 months before I would even consider putting it in the hands of a collection agency. Collection agency is just going to, start with letters. Then they're
Mhm.
going to commence phone calls. And then depending on what the terms are, will determine whether or not they have full negotiation power. And sometimes they'll say, this is how we do it. If you don't like it, then we are not the company for you.
Right.
And in those cases they understand that the landlord's going to be a little bit desperate and just say, I need something. And this is
Mhm.
where, again, they will start to settle on 20 cents on the dollars.
Yeah.
So um, get the
Well, and I
judgment,
won't
hold
say
off, and then send it over if you can't collect it in house.
that's probably the best possible solution, to be honest with you. I won't say what agency we've used in the past, but I will say that they take 33% right off the top of everything they collect. And they have the ability to negotiate down to 50% of the balance. So if I send them a balance for 5,000, or I'm sorry, for 1,000, they can negotiate that down to 500, and then I'm losing 33%
On top of that,
on top of that.
yeah,
So collections agencies are not always working in your best interest, especially
no,
when the end of the month starts to roll around and
it's a
people are
numbers
trying
game.
to make goals and stuff like
Yep.
that. Like, how many times did you guys make decisions and say, okay, well, from the 20th of the month through the end of the month, everything collected on this client gets counts double towards your goal or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it's all just a numbers game, like you
Yep.
said, because at the end of
Yep.
the day, the collections agency knows, okay, if we're collecting on this paper, even if we give a little bit more to the collectors to try to bump up the collection rate, the amount that we're collecting, it's going to make sense for them. They're not going to do it if it doesn't make sense. So
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think that's the route to go. I think so in New York State, you have to get, let's assume it's an eviction.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go through and get your eviction first. And it's pretty much impossible to get a money judgment at the same time as your eviction in New York State. So then you're going to have to turn around and go back after that tenant in either small claims court or civil court, depending on how much they owe you. And then the judgment is good for 10 years. And I think it can be renewed for another 10 years after that.
Yep.
Are judgment lien searches included in the default searches for RentPrep?
Yeah. So with the base report, you're getting the bankruptcies, then you're getting the judgments and lien search along with the nationwide eviction search. So that's standard. That's the $21 package,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there you have the option to do your add-ons like your income verification, criminal, and so on.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I would do. I would basically go through the eviction process if you have to, go through the small claims court process, get your judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That judgment's going to be good. Eventually somebody's going to want to do something, and it's not every tenant. I mean, you kind of have to pick and choose, I think, the people you go the full boat with, because it does cost money to go to court.
Sure.
But if you think that tenant is eventually going to want to buy a house, a car, a boat, that's the kind of stuff that they're eventually going to get tripped up when they try to make a life move, because they have this old rental balance hanging on from way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the route to go.
Sure.
I don't even know if I would recommend sending it to collections at the end of the day. Like, it might just be something that's worth holding on to, unless you can find an agency that has really, really especially good terms or something like that, which as a smaller landlord, you're probably not going to find because they want volume.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think collections is the route to go most of the time.
I would definitely stay away from it. It's definitely not worth it from my experience. There are like attorneys out there that'll handle judgments, exclusively, but they're not making phone calls. They are just sending a letter, of intent out, and then
Right.
something else with their letterhead, and hoping that the person gets a little nervous and says, oh, now they got the attorneys involved. But that's as far as that's going to go. And I've dealt with a lot of attorneys that handle just judgments, and they'll charge an upwards of 50% commission, and whatever comes in, they're
Mm-hmm.
taking half right out the gates.
And probably plus expenses on top of that. Every
Sure.
time they send a letter, they're probably charging you for the letter, the envelope, the stamp, the time that the paralegal took to fill in the form, and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move on. Question from Sandy. My tenant sneaked a dog in when lease states no dogs. Apartment smells of urine. She always pays rent on time. Her lease is up in 2 months. She collects disability, so don't think eviction would be in my favor. What do I do?
So just because someone's collecting disability does not mean that you cannot evict them. People seem to think that just because someone's collecting Social Security or just because they're collecting disability, they're untouchable, and that's not the case. They may get some additional assistance from Department of Social Services or from a Section 8 agency or from any of the other agencies that assist when times get tough. They may actually be in a better position to find the money to deal with the situation. But again, rent payment's not the issue here. It's more just sneaking the animal in. So this is a thing where I would issue out the letter, the lease violation letter. What we always try to do is get a picture of the dog or the animal like in the unit. My favorite is when we find cats at apartments that are sitting in windows. Like you can't really get much more straightforward than that. But
do you remember that? I think it was a couple of AMAs ago. The lease said no animals. They asked the landlord if they could bring their dog over to hang out in the front yard. And then it turns out they were building a kennel off the side of the garage for the dog.
But
for the dog to be in, and had
temporary kennel. They were going to build a permanent one after that.
They told the repairman that they were building I think it was a repairman that came to the house. They told him they're building a temporary or a permanent one.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is a situation where you issue a lease violation and just start working down through that process. If the tenant doesn't move the animal out, then you just go forward with starting the eviction process.
It also looks like,
but it is what
it looks like she's got some flexibility here because
her lease is
it looks like the lease is up in 2 months. So it looks like she's torn as renewal. Yeah. It looks like she's torn to the fact that she likes that the rent payments come in on time, but it's like, is it really worth it that I've got
an animal? I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It's not, because she already says that the apartment smells of urine, which tells me that there's property damage being done. So at that point, I would issue the lease violation notice to try to get the tenant to remove the dog from the unit altogether. And if they don't do that, I don't know, 2 months left in the lease, maybe just issue a termination of tenancy notice and tell the tenant, listen, you're not abiding by the terms of your lease. You've got to move out after your lease term. But don't just do it verbally. Do whatever you need to do in your state to make sure that the termination of tenancy is legitimate, have it served or send it certified or whatever it is that you need to do in your state to make sure that it's legit. So if the tenant doesn't move at the end of their lease term, you have the ability to start that eviction process.
All right. Anything, Carlos? Are you good?
I'm good. I'm a cat guy.
I think cats might be worse for the property.
So
I don't know. What do you think, Andrew?
You're asking me at the exact wrong time. We literally have a house that we just dubbed Flea House. Long-term tenant just vacated this unit, and we knew that like the client bought the property knowing that it was going to be a full rehab after this tenant moved out. So we've just been kind of letting this tenant live their best life in this house. And it was finally time for her to move out. So the tenant moved out, and I went over to the property to just do a quick walkthrough. check to see how much damage there was, check to see how much debris was left behind that we were going to have to haul out, things of that nature. And we knew she had pets. We're strictly no pets for the most part. We allow service animals, but we don't want pets. And this is the exact reason.
Yeah.
People don't take care of their animals. Like, I have a dog. I've had dogs basically my entire adult life, and my dogs are well managed, well taken care of. But for whatever reason, it seems like most people don't take care of their animals properly. And then you wind up with a situation like what I had, where I walked out of the property after being inside this house for maybe 10 minutes. I walked out of the house and I felt something on my leg. I walked to my car to grab a key box to throw on the front door. And I looked down at my leg, and it looked like somebody had taken a pepper shaker to my legs. I had so many fleas on me, on my shoes, on my socks.
Man.
And like, I've been doing property management long enough that I realize that carrying a change of clothing with you is vital to this job. I always have a full change of clothes with me, but I did not have shoes. I had to call my office. And be like, can somebody bring me a pair of shoes so that I can, because I wasn't getting in my car like that.
Yeah.
So everything went into garbage bags. The socks and the towels that I used to wipe myself off went right in the garbage. The shoes went in the dryer.
Were you doing all of this in the parking lot?
I was on a street. I was literally standing on a side street in Buffalo, sitting on the back of my car with no shoes, no socks on, saying many, many, many nasty things while trying to figure out how to deal with the situation. But yeah, I literally, like, I stripped off my shoes and socks as soon as I realized it, and took a towel and tried to like wipe as many of the fleas off of me as I could. But like literally all of it went, like the socks and the towels went right in the garbage. Yeah. The shoes I just bought 3 weeks ago, if I hadn't just bought them, I probably would have just pitched those out. Those ended up going into the dryer on ultra hot mode for like 2 hours just to kill anything. I kind of took the bed bug approach to it. Sure. Get them hot so that they die off if they're on the shoes at all. So
yeah,
that's tough. It's tough. Like, that's a nasty situation. That property owner. So we literally we're writing up the quoting on that right now to do the trash out and stuff like that. And I told the property owner, I'm like, listen, just from a health and safety standpoint, we have to treat this like a hazmat situation. We're going to send guys in with Tyvek suits with booties on and set off flea bombs and wait for a couple days and then go in and do the trash out and then probably treat again just using the over-the-counter stuff at Home Depot. And then before we start really getting in and doing the actual rehab, we're probably going to have a professional come in and treat with actual spray chemicals and stuff like that. It's that bad. So they get it. They understand. They bought the property knowing that they were going to have quite a bit of work to do. But yeah, that was definitely not something that we'd anticipated.
Yeah. So my last apartment I lived in, my roommate had a cat, and the cat's litter box was down kind of like a mudroom hallway. So nobody ever really went down there. It would get cleaned every once in a while. It was kind of hidden, and there was a little alcove where we had the box sitting. Mm-hmm. And after a while, we kept cleaning the litter box. The smell was still coming. We could not figure out where the smell was coming from. And it smelled like the cat had peed somewhere.
Right.
Come to find out, the cat must have gotten intrigued with something slightly to the right of it and had been peeing on the floor in the corner. So not only, and these were hardwood floors, it had been peeing on these hardwood floors, completely ruined. And this was an apartment. Completely ruined the hardwood floors, and the angle that the cat was peeing up was also up the drywall. So it had hit the corner, destroyed the flooring right there, destroyed the wall, and left like maybe the worst smell I've lived in a property with. So luckily one of my roommates is a flooring guy, but
nice. That worked out.
So it did work out, and they made a deal with the landlord to repair the floors, but like, man, was it bad. And we had no idea where it was coming from.
Was it a male cat or a female cat? Do you remember?
It was a male cat, and he had not been
neutered.
What would it be, neutered? Yeah, he had not been fixed. So, and my buddy who was the primary caretaker for it was a corrections officer. So he would go out in Geneva. So it was like 4-hour drive. Like everyone, he'd load the food up for the cat, drive out to his job, work 3 days on, come back. So, the supervision wasn't fully there.
Right.
But and the cat kind of had a little bit of free reign.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's
but cat can destroy your floor.
Cat urine is incredibly caustic. Like people don't understand that cat urine is so caustic. Like it ruins floors. It'll ruin metal. Like it'll ruin the finish on metal if it's left to sit there long enough. So and it's incredibly hard to get rid of the smell, especially cat urine. Like you basically have to clean. There's a company locally here that we've used that does I don't know what the chemical is, but they're like a fire and storm resto company. So like they have this product that will literally, I've watched it happen. It literally like bubbles the urine out of the surface that it's on. So like if you spray it, we did a concrete floor in a basement and they came in and sprayed and it literally bubbled the urea out of the floor. And that was how we finally got the smell out of this place. Wow. It was a lot of work though. It was a challenge to get rid of the smell there.
Yeah. All right, looks like we got about 8 minutes left, so let's try to rip through some of these. I got a quick one right here from I got it. Question from Bird. Hello, what qualifications should new landlords look for in hiring a property management company? So I guess Andrew, just what really stands out? What are the main parts of a management company that landlords should be looking for?
So I actually have a document called the 10 questions you have to ask before hiring a property manager. It's free. You can find it at what'sdrewupto.com. You just enter your email address and it emails it over to you. Go take a look at that document because that's going to give you a really good basis for interviewing property managers so that you don't wind up with somebody that's unlicensed or unethical or whatever. I mean, there are so many bad property management companies out there. You really have to make sure that you're getting yourself a good one. As far as finding a good property management company, I would say start with the interview process. Don't just select the first one that you talk to. Don't pick your property management company based solely on their fee structure, because the cheapest property manager is probably the property manager that's also paying the least amount of attention to your property, simply because that's how labor works. The less money coming through the doors, the less time they have to spend on any individual unit in a given monthly cycle. Those would probably be the two biggest things that I would recommend. Read through the interview doc and definitely don't just base it on fee structure. Understand that different property managers operate in different ways. Some property managers have in-house maintenance. Some property managers outsource everything and mark it up. Some property managers outsource everything and don't mark it up. They just pass the invoice over or have the landlord pay it directly or whatever the case may be. So there's not really a universal answer to this question whereby I could just be like, oh, you want to make sure that they're doing X, Y, and Z. Make sure they're licensed, make sure they're insured. Those are both good starts. Most states require licensure for property management at this point. Some don't, but most do. Make sure that they're insured, get some client references, get some contractor references if they don't have in-house maintenance. Ask the clients how they are about making sure that bills get paid on time and that the client gets their rent draw on time. Ask the contractors, how are they about communication? How are they about paying their bills on time? Because those are the two biggest things in contracting: communication and getting paid. Like if a contractor's not getting paid, they're not going to work for that person for very long. So ask how long they've been there. If you get 3 clients referrals and they've all only been there 60 days, ask for somebody that's been there for a little bit longer time. Same thing with the contractors. If you get 3 contractors and they all say that they've only been working with this property manager for a month, 2 months, like those are actual red flags at that point, I would say. But yeah, what'sdrewupto.com, download the interview guide. That'll save you a lot of headache, a lot of headache in the long run.
Good. Okay. Another quick one here. What do you all think of garbage disposals in a rental house? Are they more trouble than they're worth?
Who asked that one?
That one was from Jared. It is a Facebook question.
Got it. I hate them. From a property management standpoint, I don't have one in my own house. I don't like them in managed properties because they're constantly jamming. Tenants don't understand how to use the Allen wrench to try to unjam them. I hate garbage disposals. I don't think that they add any value to a property. This is one of those questions. I've seen this asked in a couple different ways on the RentPrep forums. And this is one of those questions that's very divisive. You either love them or you hate them. And I'm in the I hate them camp.
Yeah.
I feel like the more mechanics you have in a rental property, the more obviously you're responsible for, the more issues that you eventually are going to be asking for, so for up to me, no more electricity either. You guys have candles.
Well, now you're creating a fire hazard.
That's right.
Are there more clogged drains and stuff like that though? If you're not going to put one in, then are you going to be dealing with that?
No,
that
I would say there's fewer clogged drains from not having a garbage disposal. I feel like the garbage disposals have a tendency to jam up and cause more issues than not having a garbage disposal.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking if tenants are just forcing food down them regardless and just stuffing it down.
We don't
stuffing it down the drain pipe.
Like we'll get little like food bits and stuff, but generally if it's a stop drain and it's at the kitchen, it's more often than not going to be somebody dumped grease or something like that accidentally versus somebody poured an entire can of soup down the drain and all of the noodles and chicken are stuck in the trap or something like that. No, I hate garbage disposals though for that exact reason. Like I feel like garbage disposals actually create more clogs than they actually deal with.
Drew, I like what you said about it doesn't bring any more value to the property. And that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're renovating or anything like that, or you're trying to do a turn here and say, okay, well, how can I make this a little bit more appealing to the market? I agree with you 100%.
Not make or break.
It's not
signing a lease because there's a garbage disposal.
Right. Like, this is the winner. This is it.
$50 a month because you have a garbage disposal.
Right.
I've never had a tenant approach me after a move-in and shake my hand and be like, "I chose this place because of the garbage disposal."
I don't know. Next time I market my property for rent, I'm putting that in as the headline. New garbage disposal. That's awesome.
Actually, Carlos, you mentioned something that's worth reiterating too. You said the more stuff that's there, the more stuff there is to break. And when you're talking about like garbage disposals are a good example of that, but I want to talk about refrigerators for a second and just say that like if you have an ice maker in a refrigerator, like if a tenant rents a refrigerator or an apartment that has a freezer with an ice maker in it, that freezer and that ice maker both need to work. Like it's not, I hate it when landlords are like, oh, the ice maker didn't work when you moved in here, so why would you expect it to work now? No, supply appliances that work the way that they're supposed to. Every aspect of the appliance. Like you're not going to rent a stove out where 3 of the 4 burners don't work. Like keep your appliances maintained and go with basic appliances. Like we have probably 50 of the Frigidaire 18 cubic foot refrigerators out in the field in different units and stuff like that. We go through a lot of them. Like we buy probably 10 of those things a year. I have one in the storage unit right next to me right now, still brand new in the styrofoam because we use them that frequently. It's a great basic refrigerator. You can get it in white, you can get it in stainless, you can get it in black. It doesn't have an ice maker. You can add one if you want, but it doesn't come with it by default. It's a very basic fridge and it's big enough for a family of 2, 3, maybe 4 might be stretching it. It's a very bare bones basic fridge. They're not terribly expensive and there's nothing to break on it. If it breaks, you're basically replacing the entire fridge because it's the compressor that died. But there's not an ice maker or like think of just in an ice maker assembly. And people don't really think about this. There's like just in the door, you have the flapper that actuates the switch. You have the switch. You have the thing that rotates the ice to spin it down. You have the buttons on the front. There's so many things that can break. Eliminate those failure points, and it'll
don't worry. I just
experience way better.
I just had one break 4 or 5 months ago. Luckily, it was a fridge that was within 1 year, so I still had the manufacturer warranty. But Yeah, it broke pretty good, and they didn't have any clue how to fix it, so they had to put a whole new ice maker in there.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to give a property management pro tip here at the end of the show too. Don't buy Samsung and LG appliances.
Wow.
Buy your appliances from appliance manufacturers, and buy your electronics and cell phones from people that make electronics and cell phones. And I'll just leave it at that. Buy your refrigerator from somebody that makes fridges, not somebody that's primary job is cell phones and electronics.
I don't know. I think I actually read an article that said Samsung is producing more. They're starting to cut down on how many smartphones they're producing, and they're producing more appliances. So they're shifting into that. They're shifting into that market. So
I was real quick story to wrap up the AMA here. I was staying out in Cleveland. We had an Airbnb in Cleveland. We were out there for a weekend and it had a Samsung refrigerator. And I fell asleep on the couch in the living room. An open concept house. You could see from the living room right into the dining room and kitchen and all that. 2:00 in the morning, the Samsung refrigerator, it has a tablet screen on the front of it, a full-size tablet screen on the front of it for whatever reason, starts making noise and lights up and everything else. I almost lost it. It woke me up at 2:00 in the morning. I thought somebody was in this Airbnb. I was disoriented. I was tired. I didn't know what was going on. So I will never, ever, 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 ever buy a Samsung refrigerator for that reason alone. But
oh my God.
I hope that they don't make a big push into the appliance market because they're not good. They're really not.
Yeah. Well, all right. What do we got? We got 2:02.
We do.
Eastern. All right. Well, I think we got through a lot more questions than I had anticipated us getting through. So I think a good job there. And thanks to Carlos for hopping on and helping us out there a little bit.
No, I appreciate the invite. Again, if there's ever any questions, you're a RentPrep client and you have a question regarding a report, or you're unclear, or you want a little bit of advice, that's what we're here for. Give us a call, talk to one of the screeners, get a little bit of insight, feel comfortable about what you're doing, and leave the guesswork, out of it as much as you can.
And don't be afraid to call RentPrep, and they pick up the phone every time. I guarantee it. I call all the time. I call RentPrep's offices probably.
He does. Oh, it's Andrew. It's Andrew again.
Yeah, probably once a week or so I will call and have either a question or, hey, this report came back blank. Can you guys look at it? Or this doesn't look quite right to me. Can you guys explain or whatever? And it's nice because the screeners all know and understand the product that they are standing behind, and they do stand behind it. And it's a nice touch versus just an automated report that nobody's going to be able to be around to answer questions for you. You're kind of left to your own devices.
Yeah, all the screeners do all of the customer service. This is what they do, and it comes out in the customer service, the product, and everything. So,
absolutely,
yeah, definitely utilize the service.
Awesome. All right, I'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Thank you guys so much for watching this month's episode of the AMA session. We do these every month, usually towards the end of the month. I think is it always the third Monday, Josh?
I think that's what
this year it has been. We typically try to target third Monday of the month. And these go live on our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/RentPrep. That's the RentPrep for Landlords Facebook group. If you're not a member there already, definitely hop on there. The people in the group get to ask questions as part of our AMA session, which is kind of nice. And you can see, Josh actually said we're answering Facebook question, or we're answering from the contact form, or wherever the question came from. So we do try to answer a variety of questions from different places as well. But the best place to ask is
we don't make any of them up. They are all legit, real submissions.
Yeah. And honestly, it's good. We should probably plug the Facebook group and say, if you're not in there, get in there, because are we over 13,000 in that group yet?
Yes, I believe we are. I think we're in mid 13,000s.
Yes. Let me see here. 13. Oh, we're almost to 14. We're at 13.9.
Yeah, 13.9. Yeah.
Time for a party.
Josh, are you doing anything for the 14,000? How do you say this? Thousands?
14,000.
We may have some stuff planned. Just stay tuned.
All right.
We'll keep anybody. So join that group and look out for some posts from me.
Cool. And the group is great because there's well, almost 13,000 landlords in it at this point. So if you have a situation you haven't encountered before, or you're just not sure, it's a great place to ask, because even if your question doesn't get picked up and answered on the AMA session, you're still getting the benefit of the knowledge of all of those landlords all over the country who have experienced a million different things differently than you have, and they can provide a little bit of insight in that capacity. So it's pretty cool. Facebook.com/groups/RentPrep. What's Drew up to.com if you're interested in the 10 questions you have to ask before hiring a property manager. Josh, any last words?
No, I can't believe it's almost fall.
I know, right?
We've blown through this summer.
The whole summer's gone already.
Especially for us in Buffalo. We are closing back in on the colder weather.
But football's coming, and that's what matters.
Yes.
Carlos, any final words?
Just, if you haven't done so already, take a look at the income verification report. It's a great tool. It answers a lot of questions out there. So again, it's at a great price, and it is available to all RentPrep clients.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining me. We're going to go ahead and end it off there, and we will talk to everyone next month.